Back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As you all know, I'm Stef. Go by Big Baby Stef in our Discord channel. Like, I had to bring two dudes on from the community, the two whitest kids in the Discord channel. Got D-Rid43, Burrow Lover 9 with us today. And we've just been having a blast the last week, diving into this rookie class on the Discord, in live streams, even hours leading up to hitting record. I'm staying up till 3 a.m. because we got Burrow Lover on the West Coast, and he's like 15 years old. So now I got to talk through rookie drafts. We put the first round out last week. We're going to dive into the second round today. There have already been changes to that first round, mainly Emeka Egbuka deciding not to declare for the NFL draft. I did see a really interesting take in the Discord. I believe you posted it, Isaac.
He has 1,041 yards to become the all-time leading receiver for OSU.
It's like I almost need to fact check it because that sounds way too.
It's pretty crazy considering how many receivers they got and they've produced.
Yeah, it's because they all leave early. He's just stayed forever. He's got stats.
He's a junior. If he goes one more year and gets to 1,000 yards, that's not going to be too bad.
Yeah,
and honestly, he did need to say that extra year. See him produce a little bit more.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, look, I'm going to start sharing my screen. We'll jump into it. I want to dissect the first round, and then we're going to go through our second round, maybe a little bit more, because I'm deep in the lab on this 2024 class. I have all 48 players mapped out for a 4-round rookie draft. Now, obviously, a lot of those players are going to churn throughout the process once we get draft capital testing. A lot of these guys have massive red flags. But right now, with what we can look at from the college production, the efficiency, the nerdy stats like breakaway run rate, contested catch, yards after contact per attempt, target shares, we have all of that right now on these players that we can look at. So always evolving throughout the process. Notice I did also add TreVeyon Henderson back in. Okay, we had some comments. You know who you are. Had some comments around why did we not include TreVeyon Henderson. This is for you, so you can see where TreVeyon would be if he declared. So the same way we just took Egbuka out when he went back, we're going to leave TreVeyon in. If he goes back to school, like it was reported for a time, now I'm seeing the opposite, so now I don't really know. We can take TreVeyon out of these rankings very easily. Same thing with Michael Penix on the medicals that we mentioned last show. But we did add Troy Franklin back in here. I had to include him. He's just a guy that you can't ignore in this draft class. He has a very, very clean profile. When you look at Troy Franklin, he has an upside profile, and he has all the tools to deliver at the next level. He put up gaudy season log numbers as a junior, 20.6% target share as a sophomore at Oregon, 26% as a junior, an elite yards per route run. The thing that you get a little bit scared off of with Franklin, the one concern on his profile is the size, 6'3", 187. That is very slim for a receiver of that height. My comps for him right now are Calvin Ridley, Devontae Parker, DJ Chark. That's a very wide range, but that's the archetype of player that we're looking at. That's his range of outcomes to me. Looking at Troy Franklin right now, he's getting mocked to the back of the first round. There's some beautiful landing spots there. And I think at worst, he's a guy who can be a very useful deep threat. At absolute worst. Like he can be a role player, and at best, he's an alpha wide receiver one. So that's a guy you want to bet on, especially him having the early declare, having the monster season that we didn't see from the Keon Coleman's of the class. Even the Brian Thomases of this class did not post anywhere near a 26% target share in their respective offenses. But let's talk about the 202, right? We had Brian Thomas at the 112. In our last mock, we moved him down to 201. So now the 202. D-Red, we'll let you handle this one.
Yep.
At the 202 in this Dynasty Superflex mock draft.
Yep. At the 202, I'm going to take Jonathan James McCarthy. This bet at the 202 is about the NFL loves winners, and winners keep their jobs, both as QBs and head coaches. You know, he's 26-1 as a winner. That's the best of the last decade. He's third all time in win percentage. He has a 73% completion percentage, 5-to-1 touchdown ratio, He's 6'3". He's athletic. He's got a live arm. I wouldn't say he's got a strong arm. Like, he's not going to throw it 90 yards down the field, but kind of like some of those baseball players, it really comes off their arm quick. When you play Michigan, you're not saying, hey, we got to stop JJ McCarthy and Roman Wilson. You're saying we got to stop Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, right? And so because you have these one-on-ones on the outside, it makes his life easier, and that's why he does have that 73% completion percentage. There was a game, the Penn State game, he didn't even attempt to pass the entire second half of the game. I mean, that's how much they rely on this run game and how much he's hidden. But shout out to ZT. He's in in a couple of leagues here. He's in Kings. He was actually at the Rose Bowl, and the one thing I asked him was like, did you pick up anything live from watching him? And he said, yeah, he's got a live arm, but he's got some Zach Wilson tendencies to him, in that every pass is the same pass. He doesn't know how to layer the ball. And what I mean by that is, okay, if you have a little screen pass dump off, it's a 90-mile-an-hour fastball flamethrower, right? He doesn't know how to put air under the ball. He doesn't know how to throw to multiple levels of the field. It's just all the same fastball throw coming out of his arm, which isn't great. But the conclusion here that I'm going to come to, and why I'm going to take JJ here at the 202, is he's accurate. He's a great decision maker. He has a knack for winning with CEO tendencies. Now, not all coaches are going to want this Caleb Williams type that does what they want and they work off script, right? Like you're a Bill Belichick, for example. You've come up with a game plan all week. You don't want to get to Sunday and Caleb Williams is doing whatever the heck he wants. You want a guy who is going to go into a game plan, and execute the offense. It takes someone special to execute an offense not designed around them. It takes a lot for the quarterback to say, hey, yeah, that's fine if we don't throw it past the second half. Like, how many guys are going to be okay with that? And not only to buy into that, but get others to buy in. And that's why JJ's going to get this high draft capital that I don't think people are really projecting in yet.
Where do you think JJ McCarthy is going to go in the draft right now? I have him in my rankings, which are posted in the Discord. Keep those updated, constantly post them there. I do have draft capital projections for these guys just based on what I'm hearing in the marketplace, what the consensus seems to be from mock draft media.
I would say top 10 is likely. I'd say 50-50 on the top 10. I mean, I had him at 103 with Bill Belichick, but I think with Bill Belichick out, that changes things because I don't know that anyone outside of that old school thought process would be interested in taking someone like JJ that high. Denver is a landing spot where Sean Payton, you get this guy that is likable. I think he had some problems with Russell Wilson being likable. And so you get this guy that's likable who will execute the offense, isn't going to go out and do his own thing. Not all coaches want this Michael Penix who shows up to the game in a clown costume and a ski mask. The dude had a bag over his head before the game even started. He literally got beaten by a modern day monk. So is that good for fantasy, right? You have the CEO, game manager, distributor. Is that the same thing as what Bryce Young is, right? Bryce Young was supposed to come in and fix the culture. Bryce Young was supposed to be a CEO. Bryce Young was supposed to play for a long time, even though he's not a facilitator. So are we falling into that Bryce Young trap again? That's kind of the risk here. I think somebody that's going to draft him in the top 15, you're looking at somebody like, I know I said last episode, Jimmy G, but when Jimmy G went to San Francisco, he sat the first 8 games, and then they went 7-1 down the stretch, right? He was a distributor. He wasn't a facilitator. If he doesn't have those playmakers to be a distributor, he is going to fail in the same ways we saw Bryce Young fail. But if he has those weapons like in San Francisco to where he can distribute and make the correct decisions that he's proven he can make, then I think that's where he becomes more attractive for fantasy, and that's the bet I'm making here at the 202.
So JJ McCarthy, D-Rid, you're calling your shot at the 202. And if we're at right now in the process, I don't think it's that bad of an upside shot at all whatsoever because we know how this plays out. Right? Right now, someone might look at JJ McCarthy and just look at the counting stats and say, well, he didn't put up eyebrow-raising numbers without actually looking into the context of how that offense runs. And you alluded to it with the low volume, with the weapons around him, Roman Wilson being his wide receiver 1. Roman Wilson is not in my top 48. rookie rankings right now. So I'll keep saying that. He's just not. He's a late breakout, doesn't have elite traits or size. Besides the point. Let's get back on track. 203, Burrow lover. Who are you going with at the 203 right here? And second round, people start getting in to get their guy, start taking upside shots. So we'll see.
At the 2-3, I'm going with A.D. Mitchell. Nice name at 6'3", 195. He had 55 receptions for 845 yards and then 11 TDs. He seems to have a knack to find the end zone. He's a great separator. His routes could be crispier, and he's a horrible run blocker.
All right.
That could keep him off the field in the early downs.
I do see that he's 196. Just at least what PFF has. So, maybe give him a couple pounds in the run game. Burrow lover. We can throw him a couple pounds in the run game. Why not?
He's just not good at run blocking.
So what's a good comp for Adonai here? Because I have a pretty wide range on him. Terry McLaurin down to Michael Gallup is kind of the range. At least, again, fantasy archetypes.
On the high end, you're getting T. Higgins.
Does it bother you that Ladd McConkey beat him out at Georgia?
Yeah.
Adonai Mitchell, he's an early declare. I'll give him that. And he did have a decent, not great target share this year. 18% target share as a junior next to Worthy and Jatavion Sanders. It's good, not great. It's definitely an upside swing. I would rather take some other names. Maybe we'll get there. We might find one of those at the 204. D-Rid, who you got for us with this next pick?
At the 204, I've got the my guy of all my guys. This might be an overdraft here at the 204. It's kind of a diamond.
When it's all said and done.
It's kind of a diamond in the rough profile. It's Devontez Walker. It's a 6'3", 200 pounds. He did hit 23.1 miles an hour in a game. That's faster than any player in 2023 in the NFL. He's got three big concerns. Number one, he's smoother than violent, and that's caused him to be relegated to more of these vertical route tree concepts. It's caused low yak because of these vertical route tree concepts and an inconsistent involvement in the offense. Some games you see him and he goes nuclear, and some games he disappears, and I'm sure it's because he's a vertical route guy and the opposing team either has a guy or they don't. He's got a weird age breakout that I'm partially willing to excuse. The freshman year was COVID, and due to an NCAA transfer issue, he missed 4 games in 2023. But part of the reason I'm willing to excuse this is that he had 2 promotional transfers from North Carolina Central to Kent State and Kent State to North Carolina.
Only 8 games as a senior against Power 5. That's really what you're saying here, right? He had the 28% target share at Kent State, did everything he needed to do to show a D1 team in UNC that, hey, I can come play for you guys. I can ball out in the ACC. And he did do just that in those 8 games.
And my biggest red flag where I would move him way down from the 204 is if he doesn't get draft capital. It's always nice when you feel like you've evaluated a player and then he gets the draft capital that you feel like he can get. It's never good when you think, oh, this guy's a round 2 NFL draft prospect, and then he goes in the 6th round. You wonder what the heck happened. So if he falls out of those top 45 picks, I would be hesitant to draft him here at the 204. But as of today, this is where I've got him. And the reasons I'm betting on Walker is he's got great hands combined with a high point ability and elite speed. It's rare to have those together. Most guys with speed, they ignore the nuances of being a great wide receiver. Because when you have that 23 mile an hour speed to get open, it's like, why do I need to focus on contested catches? Because all your catches tend to be layups. Like nobody at Kent State or North Carolina Central is guarding a guy that can run 23 miles an hour. It's just not happening. And someone like Brian Thomas, he's got the same speed and he has the hands that you want for that speed and the deep ball ability. But at 6'5", Brian Thomas is never going to have the ability to work all 3 layers of the field like Devontez Walker could potentially based on his body type. In 1 year at UNC, is that enough to be used in a multitude of ways? Like, hey, we have Drake May. Here's this big body speed demon with hands. Let's just uncork it. We don't have to worry about using him in a ton of different ways because we only got 8 games to work with him. And then one last important thing is you have the game against Georgia. When he was at Kent State, he went 7 for 11 on 106 and 1 touchdown at a whopping 52.3% target share. Quentin Johnston, for example, against the same Georgia defense, 1 catch, 3 yards. So in this game, the Georgia defense did its thing. Constant pressure led to no time for the deep ball, and we got to see some of the underneath stuff from Walker that we usually did not get to see once he got to North Carolina. So it gives you a little bit of hope that he can develop some of this short and intermediate stuff. So despite the inconsistent career stats, Walker in this game against Georgia showed he could play with the big boys.
Love it. Love it. I would not even blame you for taking Walker, even at the 201. Which I know would be spicy for a lot of people, but he's that type of upside profile that you just gamble on what he was able to do.
Didn't you have a comp for Devontez?
Range of outcomes in terms of fantasy for me would be like Amari Cooper at the high end. I see a lot of Cooper on film when I watch him play. Definitely can play a wide receiver X role that he showed. On the low end as a comp for Walker, I do have KJ Osborne. A guy who is of the similar body type, has the speed, but hasn't been able to necessarily be a target magnet, has to play the number 3 role, right? That's the concern with Walker. Is he that good to be that number 1? So let me drop my take on the 205, because this is going to be our first running back off of the board. Now, we do have Travion in here, right? We're keeping him steady. I'm happy to provide Travion takes. I did have shout out to the comments on our last video. I did have someone asking for a Travion comp. If he was in this class, I did throw out Dalvin Cook and Miles Sanders as some comps for Travion. So I'll dangle that carrot out there. Happy to jump back on and do a full take on Travion, especially once he declares. But for the 205, I have Trey Benson. So first running back that you guys are going to hear a take on. And really with Trey Benson, he's been one of those guys that when he's been on the field, he's been fantastic. He actually missed his entire true freshman season. It was the COVID year, so maybe that played into a little bit. But as a 4-star recruit coming in, he missed his entire first year of college with an injury. And then in 2021, he redshirted. He was still at Oregon before he transferred to Florida State. He was at Oregon behind a stable of guys. Shout out to CJ Verdell, who I was high on in that class before some of the injuries took him. I know you know who I'm talking about, Burl Lover.
Yeah.
And then in 2022, as a redshirt sophomore, Benson comes into the ACC and is 3rd in the country in yards after contact per attempt, runs a very efficient 6.5 yards per attempt on 189 carries, and then threw a couple targets in there, right? 14 targets, nothing to get overly excited about, 3.8% target share, but he showed he could do it a little bit, and then he built on that. In his redshirt junior season, another very efficient season, 5.8 yards per attempt, bumped up that target share to 5% with 24 targets in that Florida State offense with Jordan Travis, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, who I'm hearing a lot of people get way too excited about in this class. No one needs to be as big as Johnny Wilson. Like, no one, no human, not even NFL player, no human needs to be that big. But with Benson, we're talking about a guy that profiles like a Joe Mixon, like an Antonio Gibson in terms of what he did in the NFL, not necessarily in college, because Gibson had that receiving profile a little bit more. But when we talk about what they're going to do in the league, this is the guy that can sustain 15 to 20 carries a game, sprinkle a couple targets in. He's not going to be a target magnet. He's not going to be this pass catching weapon that you line up in the slot, but he is a do-it-all back. And we even saw this year, like James Conner. How much juice do we think James Conner has left? But he's a guy who's just getting volume. And I think Trey Benson could be that, especially if he goes in the second round, which is where a lot of the mock drafts are putting him at the moment. So assuming that is the case, I'm really high on Benson as well. He also is just an electric runner. He was number 1 in this class in missed tackles, forced per attempt. He had 0 fumbles throughout his college career. Was one of the only players in the country to hit over 20 miles per hour 3 times this season, according to College Football Network. So there's a lot to like about Trey Benson, what he can do as a rusher. At 6'1", 223, that is a picture-perfect BMI. And one thing I kind of like about Trey Benson, besides some of the breakaway run percentages, which were elite, is that he has less than 400 carries in college, only 350 carries across his college career. So this guy, for a back of his size, we usually don't see them this lightly used coming into the league. If you want to go down that narrative street of, hey, SEC running backs who take all this punishment in college tend to break down a little bit earlier in the league, that's one thing that Trey Benson does not have. What do y'all think about that pick?
I like it. I agree with most of your takes. He runs both run schemes very well. He can run inside and outside, very versatile.
53.9% breakaway run rate this season. It's just phenomenal. That's elite numbers. That leads the country. All right. Burlover, give us the 206.
So, 206, we got Bo Nix.
Bo Nix.
Yeah.
QB heavy in this Superflex mock draft today.
He had a few lackluster years at Auburn. He didn't surpass 2,600 yards. Highest completions percentage was 61% before transferring to Oregon and skyrocketing up boards. Looking like a completely new player. He has a very good arm, can work every level of the field, and he hasn't faced much pressure, so it makes me question if he's able to do so at the next level. My comp for him so far is Ryan Tannehill.
Didn't he have a decent amount of rushing production as well, or was he more of a behind the line of scrimmage only type scrambler?
No, he had a decent amount of rushing.
And Tannehill showed that as well, almost like a Russell Wilson type rusher, 400 yards at most, but he can squeak out first downs, the sneaky rusher, as they say.
Yeah, and I mean Tannehill
with grit.
Tannehill and Bo Nix, they're both very athletic guys. Tannehill used to be a wide receiver. That's why, any year that you have some quarterback who doesn't have very many stars, whether it's like Trey Lance or AR, Ryan Tannehill always comes up because he's just raw. He was super raw. Bo Nix has played a lot more football, but he's only been good as of late. But he is that same sort of tall, athletic build. You just wonder, is it the playmakers, or did he finally turn some corner?
Yeah, the processing definitely looks better from what I've seen, but it's one of those things where when everything's going right around him, he looks better, and that's the same thing with Ryan Tannehill.
Love that. So 207, D-Rid, you got next here. Yeah. I just want to say right now, to me, in Superflex rookie drafts, this is take your shot on running back range. So there's a lot of running backs that I want to talk about. There's more as we get into the early third round. Hopefully draft capital and testing doesn't take a couple of these guys off the board. But there's a nice range where if any of these guys get draft capital, if any of them test extremely well, they're going to be guys that we have to look at, even as almost as like Zamir Whites and Jerome Fords and Ty Chandlers and Chuba Hubbards that we just saw this year, even if they're not in great situations, even if they're not taken in the first 3 rounds of the draft. There's going to be a lot of interesting names to look at. But who do you have here at the 207?
Well, I want to give another shout-out real quick. I want to give a shout-out to the fantasy phenom, Alex Lott, for this little piece of advice. This is an elite wide receiver class. And, Alex, we were talking about, do you want to draft a guy, like a single guy with a pick, or do you want to look at your entire draft class and what you bring onto your fantasy team as a whole? Right? If you've got 5 second-round picks and it's an elite wide receiver class, don't you want to take as many of those wide receivers as possible? And then, one of them turns out into Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe you draft a Laviska Shenault and Denzel Mims, but you walk away with T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. So by spraying this out, it is a big picture. And so with this pick, I'm going to take Alex's advice. I'm going to take XL Xavier Legette. He wins with height. He wins with weight. He wins with speed. He's got amazing hands and ability to track the ball. He has absolutely zero nuance. Okay, don't get it twisted. He has a super late 5th-year breakout. But this is a really cut and dry evaluation. Either he tests like a freak or he doesn't. And if he doesn't test like a freak, I would not draft him with the 412. But if he does test like a freak, he has that DK Metcalf upside. Or, he could still be Chase Claypool. I think Chase Claypool failed for different reasons, but the difference is when you get these vertical routes, you want athletes because they win with height, weight, speed. Steph, one thing you've always done is you said, speed doesn't matter. Well, speed doesn't matter when you're running routes and you're winning with agility. But when it comes to the vertical route,
I said 40 time. Doesn't matter for wide receivers. But go ahead.
40 time. Excuse me. Sorry. Apologies. But when it comes to these vertical route trees, you do have to have the RAS to be a winner, because you're not winning in any other kind of way. You are winning with physicality and speed. This is a purely upside play.
Xavier Legette is really interesting. He is really interesting. The fact that he is 227 at 6'3", that's freaking nature. 23% target share in the SEC. That's something I think you can get excited about. This guy could just be a unicorn. And when you look at his efficiency, he was 12th in the country in yards per route run, 17.7 yards per reception. That is one thing that does correlate to wide receiver breakouts, is that yards per reception for wide receivers. And so for Legette to have a 17.7 yards per reception, that's Jalen Waddle level.
One more thing I wanted to add is that the reason I'm willing to take someone like Devontez Walker over him is Devontez Walker has more excuses.
I'll be interested to see with Legette, do NFL teams look at him like a gadget weapon type player, where that can either be what he's relegated to or that adds to his fantasy value, where you start looking at a Debo type role for him. Debo's name always comes up because of the South Carolina school listed next to their name, but that usage, I think, is on the table for Legette. And you saw that in his college career. You saw him on special teams, breaking off 70-yard plus kickoff returns against high-level competition. There's some really interesting things with Legette. But let me drop some takes on the 208 here. I told you we're going to dive into running backs now. I'm going Bucky Irving, running back out of Oregon. At 5'10", 195, Bucky Irving, don't let the size get you turned away from him, because when you look at everything he did at Oregon this year, it's phenomenal. He's going to be an early declare if he comes out in this draft class. He had over 6 yards per attempt over all 3 years, 11.7% target share. This is a guy that can be a receiving weapon like you see with, I won't even say Austin Eckler, I'll say James Cook. I'll say Dion Lewis. I'll throw out other names that are these undersized target magnets at the running back position, because that's what Bucky Irving is. Even Devon Achane right now, I think, is what you're looking at with the Bucky Irving, who has a lot more in the pass-catching department, at least what he did in college. So Bucky Irving was 12th in the country in missed tackles forced, only 1 fumble in 3 years, 3.99 yards after contact per attempt, which is just elite. Bucky Irving was running through mofos in the Pac-12 all season long, showed us that he has the receiving profile. If you see a guy with above 8% target share in college in a season, you can very confidently say that receiving is a weapon that they have as part of their skill set, and that's why a team is going to draft them. We've seen that with pretty much every running back. That's why I was pounding the table on Travis Etienne being a pass-catching receiver, because he had that 8% that senior year in Clemson. We saw the same thing with Bucky Irving at a younger age. Maybe he can bulk up to 200. That was a question that we had with Kenneth Gainwell. With Bucky Irving, he's a guy, even if he is at 195 and doesn't bulk up more, we've still seen in the modern NFL game these small, explosive guys that can break tackles, get used in the receiving game. They can just have big, boom, blow performances, and that's exactly what you're banking on with Bucky Irving at the 208. So 209, Burrow Lover, you got the next pick here. Who you going with?
I think I'm going to take another running back off the board here with my boy Braelon Allen. He's got great size at 6'2", 245.
245?
Yeah, he don't move like it, though. He moves great. He's going to declare early, but he does not run outside at all. I've only seen him run middle. It makes me question if he is able to do that. And he has 9 fumbles through 3 years. 9 fumbles. That's going to keep him off the field if he does not get that fixed. And coming from Wisconsin, he has a lot of wear and tear on those tires. 597 carries through 3 seasons, almost 600 carries.
Braelon is another one of these guys, like Xavier Legette, that does look like a unicorn just being 6'2", 245. I mean, that's insane. Over 1,200 yards as a freshman and a sophomore, 7.2% target share, 29 receptions as a junior. That is really good. It's not going to make him a slot monster, a receiving weapon by any means, but he's a guy who can get it done. He can carry a workhorse load, which is, I think, what teams are going to ask him to do. He did gain, according to reports, around 15 pounds coming into this junior year. And at least from what I saw on tape was not a lot of juice, right? I'm not a tape grinder, tape watcher. There's other guys that can probably tell you a lot more about the explosiveness. I feel like I did not see that. It was more running right through guys versus I'm going to juke you out of your shoes and get upfield. And when you talk about the NFL game, we've seen that break down so many running backs, whether it's, Najee Harris is probably the low-hanging fruit. A.J. Dillon is another one who I liked A.J. Dillon a lot coming out because he did have a lot of breakaway runs and explosiveness. Braelon Allen even has more in the receiving game. So I think he's a guy that at worst you're looking at that floor of just a big back that'll get goal line touches, that'll get some receiving work, hopefully in a good offense. But if he doesn't get that, it's going to be pretty scary. I'll be curious to see the draft capital. Well, and I wonder this, and maybe you guys know something about it. Who actually tells these players what their draft stock is?
So a lot of times they'll have meetings with player executives or scouts. It could be at a bowl game or it could be at some of the Senior Bowl, like the All-Star game stuff, which obviously then they've already declared. But they kind of get an idea. They kind of get an idea of where they're going to go and their stock. And I'm sure part of it with Braelon Allen too is that, he does have so much wear and tear on the tires that he knows it's only a matter of time before he does sustain an injury, and then his career is down the tube.
He already sustained the ankle and played through it this year.
Yeah, and so it's like, well, I better just get to the NFL before I suffer some injury that I cannot reverse. But assuming you're not drafted first round, which he's not going to be, you have an automatic 4-year contract in the NFL that's guaranteed. So if you are able to get NIL money, then you push off that guaranteed 4 years for another year. So you've made a year in NIL versus if you leave for the NFL early, then all you get is the 4 years. So if you can stay in college next year, you get 5 years of payment. I'm sure part of the reason too is that, you do want a chance at hitting that second contract, which is going to be the big money. And I'm sure that's, trade a little NIL for a chance at a second contract versus if you do take that NIL plus the 4 years, that's a lot more wear on your body and a less chance that you do hit that second contract.
Blake Corum flags are raising right now when you mention that.
It's a big scale thing, and I'm sure they all have their personal reasons and people telling them different things. But, it is a big math equation of how can I make the most money and where's the risk.
Braelon Allen and Blake Corum both scare me. I do have them lower in my rankings behind some of the other running backs in this class, one of which we'll talk about. Maybe I'll throw out the other one here in a minute. But we do have the 210 up for you, D-Rid.
Yep.
Really curious who you're going to take here. It's flyer territory. I think I know who you're going to pick. I can't say I necessarily agree with it, but I want to hear the take because I want to know why. I'm open to this player. I'm open to new ideas at this stage in the process.
Yep. This might be my biggest reach yet. I'm okay with it. I know I'm probably going to get some heat in the comment section on this one, but it's another diamond in the rough prospect. I'm going with Brendan Rice.
Brendan Rice.
This is just like the MHJ thing. If his last name wasn't Rice, he's not coming right here.
Well, we all knew Jerry Rice had a kid in this draft, and it's cute, it's fun. I didn't think anything of it as far as even fantasy value, but I was watching some film on Caleb Williams, and it's like this guy is popping out all over the film. It's like, who is that? It's like, oh, that's Brendan Rice. So I started watching Brendan Rice, and here's this guy. He's exactly what you would expect out of Jerry Rice's kid, which is extremely nuanced, like understands how to play the position. He's violent at the line of scrimmage. He's a slasher. He understands how to beat man coverage. But what's really going to matter for him is going to be the testing. Is he a good athlete or not? If he tests poorly, then you're not going to be taking him here at the 210. You don't have to worry about scheming him open. Someone you had to scheme open last year about this pick would be Jalin Hyatt. Jalin Hyatt has his 4-touchdown game against Alabama. And every one of those touchdowns, he's in motion. He's in a stacked bunch where he's the back guy in the stacked bunch, and the guy in front is basically just clearing out the corner so he can get a free runway. Or Jalin Hyatt's in the slot. Like, there is always some excuse why Jalin Hyatt is getting open. And Brendan Rice is a guy that can get open on his own. Now, he does have some production flaws that you worry about. He was at Colorado for 2 years, which is a total disaster of a program. He transfers up to USC. His first year at USC, he's the wide receiver 4. And in 1 year, he's upgraded to the wide receiver 2 behind only a 5th year. Now, one of the wide receivers that he was above him last year was Jordan Addison. Now, Jordan Addison, even in this same offense, only went 59, 875, and 8. And I think it's important to know that, because why would we expect conventional production numbers out of an unconventional offense? Caleb Williams doesn't play favorites. He spreads the ball around to everyone. And when you look at the historical trends of this offense, not only Jordan Addison, but Drake London, he went 88 for 1,000 and 84 and 7. The wide receiver ones tend to be anywhere from 750 to 1,000 yards. So Brendan Rice, I think he had 750 and 12 touchdowns. So you do kind of have that more of the X role in this offense, but I'm sure part of it is just Caleb Williams chucking it down the field. Combined with the testing, I'd be more hesitant if he's anything after the fourth round of the draft. But
the late declare is interesting with Rice. He's had a unique career path. One of the things I'm curious on him is, why did he start at Colorado? I'm curious why he couldn't get on, especially with the name that he has. Why couldn't he get onto a big Power 5 scene just for the name alone? But he did show that he can be a big play threat. 16.4% target share as a senior at USC, 12.9% the year before that. So he hasn't had that monster alpha target share type season or anything close to it, but did show some interesting upside numbers. And I'd like what you said on the film takes. That's something that we can get behind, especially when we add in the testing. Rashee Rice was the same exact way last year. Rashee Rice, I believe, ran a 4.4 flat. And that was after you had looked at some of the bumps in the road that Rashee had to overcome at SMU with incumbent guys in that offense. So this could be the same case here with Brendan Rice. It's interesting. There's a lot of running backs that I'm interested in here, which is why I'm at the 211 going to go with my boy Jonathan Brooks. This is a guy you're getting the injury discount on. Yeah, this was the running back out of Texas, took over when Bijan and Roschon both left that Texas backfield. He goes on a monster tear for 10 games, 187 carries, 1,135 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns on the ground, 25 of 29 receiving with almost 300 receiving yards. And this is something that's not looked at enough, in my opinion, which is yards per reception for running backs. A lot of guys that you don't necessarily think of as explosive pass catchers, you can look at their college yards per reception, and that can tell you a lot about what they were able to do. Even if you look at a guy like Jonathan Taylor, a lot of people had questions about him as a receiver coming in, but if you look at his yards per reception, really, really, really good. So 11.4 yards per reception for Jonathan Brooks as well. 6'2", 207 per PFF. That puts him right at BMI range that we want, 28.1 BMI. Usually we want guys in that 28 to 30 range. 18th in breakaway run percentage. That was ahead of Braelon Allen, just behind Trayvon Henderson, who we have in the first round of this mock draft, assuming that he declares. 9th in yards after contact per attempt. And this guy's really an upside swing in the late second. Right? Maybe he comes back sooner than expected, which we just saw with Breece Hall, with Javonte Williams. They came back sooner than expected from ACL tears. We've seen guys come back sooner than ever from the Achilles. So I'm not even totally going to say you're taking this pick to light the first year on fire, but that is the risk that you take. Right? With a ACL tear in week 10 of the college football season means he's probably going to be at best ready to go late training camp. That's kind of what you're betting on if you're expecting Jonathan Brooks to play this year. But if you're not, which is, late second, you're taking the upside swing. Let me set in a guy for a year and hope he explodes and becomes that next DeAndre Swift, which is the guy that I have him comp to at the moment. There is certainly a range of outcomes with him, but he looks like that Miles Sanders type guy, that Cam Akers type guy, or at least what we wanted Akers to be before all the Achilles tears started catching up with him. But Swift Sanders, I think, is a safe one when you talk about a guy who looks like a workhorse but can also be used as a receiving back, which certainly helps him in PPR and even non-PPR formats for us in fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting him deciding to come out for the NFL draft despite tearing his ACL. I'm sure that part of that is CJ Baxter in the wings there for the, I believe, 2026 class. He's amazing. So you wonder where is that retention value, I guess, right? Like at what point are you willing to just say, well, I'll move this to 11 and not get any benefit for a year, right? Or maybe you still like guys at 211. Where is that point in the draft where you're willing to just take this?
Well, we do have a reference point right now with Kendre Miller of a guy, and we even saw this with ETN, a guy who sat out his entire rookie year, and the value, while it did dip, right? No one was super excited about ETN, especially during the season. There was a little bit of a hype cycle in the offseason once people started remembering, oh, wait, ETN's a thing. He's just been waiting in the wings with this Urban Meyer season. You're kind of seeing that right now with Kendre Miller. Hey, Alvin Kamara may not be there next year. This could be the guy who takes over. He's shown some flashes. A lot of people like his profile, myself being one of those. We're probably going to have the same thing where we don't get the testing from Jonathan Brooks. It was like if we were going to get the testing from him and he blazes, I think he's easily a guy you can move up into this 206, 208 range. But as of right now, he's kind of a black box and an injury risk.
At the 212, we're rounding it out with another running back. We're going with the Michigan back, Blake Corum.
Blake Corum over my boy Donovan Edwards. It hurts.
I was calling him Brokeback Blake after that national championship. He's wearing that big cowboy hat.
I mean, if you got to come at my boy Penix, you got to come at him too. He's coming in at 5'8", 213 pounds. 59 rushing TDs, 4 years. That's almost 15 touchdowns a year. He's got great burst and elite vision. Could have came out last year as an early declare, but decided to go back for the NIL and to compete for a natty. I question how much he benefits from running behind Michigan's excellent O-line.
Yeah, that's scary. The fact that he couldn't beat Edwards out clean. Now, maybe Edwards is just great.
Could be.
Maybe Harbaugh just put these guys into their roles. We have seen Harbaugh decimate some of the usage on these guys, like Nico Collins, for example. So we could see a weird Harbaugh thing with Corum, but it is scary that he never beat Edwards out clean. Like, why did they have to have Edwards as a receiving back if Corum could do it all? Who do you see Corum as, in terms of the comps? Names I have listed are James Conner, Chris Carson. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing both those. Those sound like good comps.
And as of right now, Corum's getting the draft capital. I don't know if that'll hold, but as of right now in these mocks, he's looking like a day 2 pick.
Every top 5 I see has him in the top 5. The highest I've seen him come in as was number 2.
Oof.
I don't agree with him coming in at 2. He's more so like the 4 or 5 for me.
Yeah, one of the I remember last year there was a lot of talk that he might be in last year's draft, and one of the comps that he was getting a lot was like Khalil Herbert, where he's a really good runner. He really, like you said, he does have the vision. But you just wonder, Khalil Herbert's never held up. He's never held up. The testing probably not going to be great. But for what he is, he's a very high technical runner and understands what it is to be a running back. I think someone else that's like that is Kyron's a little bit like that. Obviously, Kyron has a great situation backed by that. But obviously, I think Corum's going to test a little better than Kyron. I don't know if it's worse. It's possible to test worse than Kyron. But yeah, I remember. But yeah, last year Khalil Herbert was a pretty consistent comp until he decided to go back to school.
Another thing on Corum is that he can't pick up the blitz, so that's definitely going to keep him off the field on third downs.
I don't like to hear that. Yeah, you don't look at him as even though I say James Conner, Chris Carson, he's still a good 10 pounds lighter than those guys, which I guess is what you're saying, right? It makes him a liability as a blocker, just him not having that elite NFL size.
Yeah, he's willing to try, which is great, but he just can't do it.
33 BMI, which is actually for a guy at 5'8" to be 213 is you're pretty built. I mean, you see that from Corum. Even without the pads, the guy looks like Hulk. His traps are insane. 33 BMI. That's outside of the range you really want. Now, I'm not a BMI truther by any means. We had people missing out on Devontez Smith over BMI stuff. I'm not in on that, but 33 BMI is not the ideal range. So I think that's another thing you could look at to say he's almost too big or just doesn't look like the guys that score high in fantasy. But he can carry a workload, and he showed that time and time again outside of that end of 2022. 5% target share as a senior. There's some interest. There's some interest with what Blake Corum could be, especially if he gets the draft capital. There's a lot of other names that I want to talk about right now. I have the full 4 rounds of Superflex rookie drafts in the Discord channel, keeping them updated as new information comes in. We have the Senior Bowl coming up. Obviously, we have the NFL draft and draft capital and testing. We may see, just like we saw with Egbuka today, not all of these names that we're looking at are guarantees to declare for the NFL draft. So we'll make those adjustments on the fly here. Anything else before we sign off, boys?
After talking about Corum, he kind of sounds like a former fan favorite of the show, Ronald Jones. Disagree?
What?
Can't block, small.
I don't disagree at all. Hey, I was on the Leonard Fournette side of that debate. The records are showing here on this channel. Your boy was all in on Fournette.
I was just getting a little PTSD. I was getting a little PTSD listening to that characteristics of Blake Corum. It's like, I think it's Ronald Jones again. He's back.
Donovan Edwards should be the guy we're talking about. Because you see with Donovan Edwards, 6'1", 210, more your prototypical size, career 5.7 yards per attempt, 9%, 8.5%, and 9.4% target shares all 3 years. If he declares he's an early declare with that level of target share, the comps for this guy are sky high. He could almost look like a Javonte Williams at the next level with what he can do as a receiver and as a rusher. He can be that versatile young workhorse that everyone gets excited about.
Javonte had the highest missed tackles forced attempt. He had the second highest though when he came out.
So who's another comp? If you think of who's the guy who gets
so far for Donovan Edwards has been Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones, love it.
Yeah.
One that's kind of gross. It kind of reminds me of is TJ Yeldon out of Alabama, which nice. he did underperform, but he really is. It's kind of that receiver middle body type. I think TJ Yeldon's probably a little taller. I mean, he looks tall. He's built tall, but kind of that same stylistic. And I'm not sure if Donovan Edwards is going to be a great athlete like TJ Yeldon was not either. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was looking at Aaron Jones, and he ran in the 4.56 is what he ran.
Interesting. Yeah, almost like a Kareem Hunt if he runs a 4.5. That's something you're looking at. And that's kind of what Javonte did as well. He didn't necessarily blaze in his testing, but he didn't need to do that because that's not how he won. So Edwards, I can't tell if he got a boost just because Harbaugh was deploying these guys in a certain way, but 9.4% target share, you don't see that a lot. That's really impressive from a college running back. Other names that we did not hit on today, Jatavion Sanders. We threw his name out there a couple of times. He did not get taken in this draft. I have him 22nd player off the board, so around that 210 range. Marshawn Lloyd, Audric Estime, Will Shipley, Ladd McConkey was on out there, Jalen Polk. These are all names that we're stewing over in the Discord channel. If you want to keep the conversation going with us, hit that link in the description. Let us know what y'all thought about the video. A like, comment, and a subscription. Always appreciated. And we'll see y'all next time. Peace.